Choip, choip, choip. Choip, choip, choip.
Congratulations, Calendar Man. That obsessive and breathy recitation of that poem really compensates for its notorious final verses. Sort of?
Except for February alone, to which we, 28, assign. Till leap year gives us 29.
I think it might be Rocksteady's own crack at it. I did some research and apparently there are a few of these. Yet still doesn't quite stick the landing. See, they tried another one, although they were closer with the previous one.
Of course, leap year comes and stays. Every 4 years, got it right. And 28 is 29.
Welcome to Arkham City. After Arkham Asylum had its little oopsie. A section of old Gotham was circled with a massive wall to act as one tough-on-crime criminal Thunderdome, where it's everyone for themselves unless you align with a supervillain, in which case you may have to dress like them, in an early GTA gang kind of way, which is especially questionable logic here when you consider the fact that someone had to smuggling green hair dye, pancake makeup, and red noses en masse. Yet obviously food's still hard to come by.
What the hell's wrong with you? We ain't eaten for days.
This stuff tastes like something Croc eats.
Look at them, eating that crap like pigs. Yeah, the clown's crew's got no class. You don't see Joker or Harley eating that crap, do you?
But hey, supervillains will treat their hench people this way. Oh yeah, by the way, you're Batman and you're in this penal zone trying to figure out what its architect, Dr. Hugo Strange, is up to. First up, the visuals. In my opinion, the graphics hold up even after all this time. It's Batman, so it's dark and that helps. And this part of Gotham is decrepit, if surprisingly densely packed with important city landmarks. It has a courthouse, museum, a massive model Utopia prestige tower, and just so happens to be close by to the Ace Chemicals building, a steel mill, and the pivotal crime alley. Convenient. Maybe puts a bit of strain on the open world nature at times, but overall a pleasant map. Not Spider-Man realistic, but gritty and cool. Just made for you to grapple about. And the character design is cool, if not for everyone. The men tend to be walking walls of meat, reminiscent of the animated series. Look at that grotesque definition. If they went any further, they would have had to give him the Val Kilmer nippled suit. I mean, look at Doctor Strange. All these qualifications, yet coincidentally, such broad shoulders. And the females are defined in other ways. I usually don't mention this. It could be that I'm overreacting. But in all fairness, I don't think nurses really wear this anymore. So let's just put this in the maybes, whether or not you like this kind of stylization. It's cool and archetypical almost, but as said, not for everyone. Really? You decided to dress the Riddler as a hipster? Alright. And why did they have to make the shark so cute? I don't want to beat a cute shark. And don't get me wrong, the game has aged. It does have its grungy elements. Musically it's good too, the standard orchestral superhero thing. Which means a lot of violin, obviously. But made suitably darker to fit with the Dark Knight. Usually kicks in during combat, or when you've started taking out unsuspecting guards. And in certain areas, when you do this, it will start to ramp up, become tenser, to mirror how dire their situation is. It sounds good enough that it doesn't feel cliché, even though it's an approach that has been used for decades with Batman. And voice acting wise, it's well known to have clout, if for no other reason than the brilliant Joker rendition by Mark Hamill.
Oh, bats. I really figured you'd last longer than that.
But there are other examples, such as the Bat's earpiece support team, as well as the extensive thug chatter and small talk. Stereotypically and obviously gravelly goons.
Did anyone notice that there were scratches on the bad side of his face?
Are you trying to be funny?
Kind of. You won't tell him, will you?
He's just messing with you. Yeah, chill out.
To their credit, there's a lot of it, but some people have been annoyed in the past about how the writers really try and drive home that being a villain means not being PC and being macho. I mean, the Riddler even uses the R word. We get it. You like to use the B word.
I'll make you meow, bitch.
And make it apparently obvious how long you've been in prison. It doesn't amuse often, but it's cool that it's there. It can be annoying when you pick it up while on high, traversing, meaning you either have to ignore it or stop and listen, and here the amount of it becomes a bit annoying because it's not infrequent, and some of the small lines repeat. So sometimes it's intrusive, but on rare occasions the Joker would let out a gem and make this vacated city feel a bit more alive.
You guys are like family to me. And you know how much pain I went through killing my family.
But it does have its hang-ups here too. Instead of being dark and brooding, Arkham's Batman is inhumanly emotionless to unnerve people.
Do you know anything about Protocol 10?
Is it some kind of hemorrhoid cream?
I doubt it.
Can sound stilted on occasion, and sometimes the delivery of other characters can be rather bold in the supervillain kind of way.
From up here, you look pretty small.
With its mannered pronunciation, but sometimes the eccentricity can be nice.
Leave my wife out of this, Batman.
Story-wise, the twist was eventually a tad predictable, and Protocol 10 a bit underwhelming as supervillain plots go. Rather convoluted preparations for smashing your goal with a hammer, but in all fairness, in all of Bruce's stoicism, in the game there occurs a bizarrely touching moment. Mild spoiler alert, you'll be surprised how much more you feel for one than the other. That's all I'll give away. So it's kind of like one good twist, one bad twist. And lastly, gameplay. It is brilliant, even though it feels incredibly familiar, because while the base of the Arkham combat system is shared by a lot of games, most notably almost every single Assassin's Creed title. Attack, counter, gadget. I've played a fair bit of these kinds of games, so I opted to play this game on hard difficulty to, I assume, decrease counter time and increase enemy damage. And even that wasn't that hard, but while familiar, the Arkham franchise was one of the pioneers of this system, and it's fun and refined. The animations are seamless, yet not too forgiving. You can get attacked while you perform certain actions, and you have to press the counter button multiple times to counter multiple people at once. Going into a combat animation is not a get out of jail free card. Everyone neatly waiting until it's their turn, or at least not until you pass a certain point. I mean, in real life someone can still attack you while you're dealing with 3 different people at the same time. You know, just throw something. But this detail is lovely. The higher your combo counter, the more XP you'll earn, and the XP will also increase with move and gadget variation. Thus, mastery and mixing it up get rewarded, and theoretically this means you won't be ignoring some of the harder moves to pull off or gadgets you don't like. Although in practice you may still ignore a few of them, because there are a lot of gadgets, each requiring different button usage at speed, and it can be hard to remember all those inputs while you're contending with flying fists. So you may forget some or panic and use the wrong ones and get bashed. Throw in a couple of boss fights, and it's nice in that it's not always a behemoth you're up against. Sometimes you stealth them or even just brawl. But these deviations are cinematic enough, combined with the mentioned music, that it still feels epic, if anticlimactic at times. The stealth gameplay is great too. Variation also gets rewarded here, as does intimidation. So maybe you can argue that you're employing psychological torture, not just because it's fun.
This is not good. What the hell? Oh man, it's just furnace.
And the guards are smart enough to take this into account and make it harder for you to get them. Or they may even start selling out their pals.
What are you doing? I need help! Like hell. You're on your own!
And lastly, this game is quite the collectathon. There are side quests, and the Riddler has been busy, hiding so many trophies for you to find. Where does he find the time or money? Yes, he's a supervillain, but still. You can interrogate people to find these if you're not in the mood to explore, but there are frustratingly many of them. I was almost burned out once I collected enough of them to progress the mission, and then you have to use your skills and gadgets to solve puzzles in order to collect them. They're not that hard, hard because a great deal of the difficulty, at least for me, came from me not knowing I can do certain things yet. Really, Riddler? You think these paltry puzzles are gonna prove your intelligence? I'm sure a riddle book would have done better. Plus, he cheats. But ultimately, this does give you something nice to do. Some mild brain heat. A change of pace from the gliding around and beating people. But honestly, they can really clutter this place at times too. And for added variety, on occasion you can play as Catwoman with different methods of traversal, other tools like her whip, and essentially the same combat system with different moves. And once all that's done, you can play the bonus mission where you play as Robin, or some challenges you unlock alongside concept art, 3D models, etc. And you can take part in score chasers as these 3 characters, including Nightwing. But in all fairness, this isn't the shortest game, so after all that, I wasn't too interested in completing external challenges. But hey, maybe extra content for you to play, like an in-between game. Lastly, there may be 1 or 2 refinement issues, maybe some graphical ones. Maybe after all their refining over the years, the bodily ragdoll physics for the unconscious can be quite loose. The most notable issue I could remember is that in the Identity Thief mission, it's difficult to advance, as it requires you to be in a very specific place to trigger. It took me 40 hours to complete all missions, side missions, and find 400 out of 440 of the Riddler trophies and photograph clues, and it is cheap on Steam. 219 Rand full price, 43 Rand 80 cents on sale. But I'm not going to use that price, because you can buy the Arkham Collection at the full price of 355 Rand and 53 Rand 25 cents on sale. Only about 10 Rand more expensive than the game on its own. That's 1 Rand 34 cents per hour of gameplay, which would be splendid, but that's if we only account for the hour total of Arkham City. I also played Arkham Asylum, and while I did that before I started reviewing games, according to Steam, that took me about 30 hours. That's 77 cents per hour of gameplay, which is brilliant. And that's before you take Arkham Knight into account. I do have that one, I just haven't played it yet. And sure, from what I hear, that can be people's least favorite entry. You don't lose anything from buying the bundle, and arguably I'd say Asylum is better than City, which is kind of a controversial opinion. It's just Asylum was right and tight, contained, compact. I wasn't always convinced by the open world nature. But to download, it is quite big, as it takes up 18.58 gigabytes on the hard drive, and I didn't even try it on the Warhorse. I'm pretty sure it would melt because of Killer Croc's stomach acid, and stereotypically it's not that kid friendly, it's kind of sweary. You hear the R word once, the M word once too. A lot of heavy-handed guard misogyny chat. I think I once heard someone make a joke about someone who was intimate with someone undergoing transition, and maybe some other things too. For instance, are they making a mistake I'm also guilty of? Confusing schizophrenia with dissociative identity disorder, and then confusing schizophrenia with schizoid personality disorder. I think that may be going on here. The game has good visuals, the graphics still hold up, nice dark and gritty, but you can notice the limitations in the open world, and sometimes it can feel a bit empty. Plus the design isn't for everyone. Walls of meat accentuating clothing. But the animations during combat are seamless. The music is good, a not too familiar superhero orchestral arrangement adds to the darkness of the city and sometimes the tension during stealth segments. And that it does in a lovely way. And the voice acting is great and extensive, most notably for Hamil, if the thug chat can be rather intrusive and maybe even repetitive at times. The combat system is fun and supremely refined. It does feel very familiar, as a great deal of games have gone this way, but the Arkham franchise is one of the pioneers, so maybe that takes the sting out of it. It maybe wasn't hard, but it's tense, requires focus, rewards mastery and move variety, which is good because it helps you not completely forget about the mass of gadgets and moves at your disposal. Good fun stealth system. It's quite fun to terrify hench people, which if you're British, in this game's case is a pun. And I didn't talk about it much, but the traversal was good too. You glide about, otherwise the open world would have been a nightmare. If that element can be a bit repetitive at times, get to high ground, glide, reel yourself higher. There's also fun collectathon and puzzle gameplay in the form of the Riddler. It's a mild challenge, if that, but something other than punching, which is a nice break. But wow, there are so many of them. As mentioned, I started feeling drained. Also, traversal kind of made me feel that way too, at least on occasion, because now and then they would ask you to go from one end of the map to the other, and since there was a big wall, you sort of had to fly in an elbow macaroni pattern. It didn't get too tiresome, but I think on occasion it may get you, but that can be harsh. There's a real nice amount of content in this game, plus some out of campaign stuff for drop in and out play. On the maybe side, some of the boss fights have different mechanics, and rarely will task you with stealth and brawling, but the music and cinematics make it as epic as taking down a monster. Well, if you want to be as tough on crime as Batman, then figuratively. And the overall plot is okay, as is the dialogue. As said, some of the thug chat is a bit forced, but there are touching and surprising moments if one was ultimately predictable. I mean, who else could it have been? Plus, Protocol 10 was a tad convoluted and underwhelming, but there was a good twist in the game too. And on the con side, some unrefinements, but really nothing serious? Come on, play it. This brilliant Batman game that does far more than the films to actually try and keep the idea alive that Batman is a detective.
Choip, choip, choip. Choip, choip, choip.